What's up, everybody? I'm Flash. This is One Man's Opinion, the show where we cover pretty much everything. And today, we're covering some more Dragon Ball Z. We've really been touching on DBZ quite a bit here lately, but I find myself really finding a lot to talk about with DBZ. Something has my mindset on old Dragon Ball Z episodes, fights, different things. I've been watching a lot of stuff on YouTube lately, and anyway, I had this thought the other day as I sat back and watched some of those different highlights. One of the most underrated fights, I think, in all of DBZ, you almost never hear anyone talk about it, in my opinion, is the Vegeta versus Recoome fight with Krillin and Gohan tagging in toward the end. So Vegeta, Krillin, Gohan versus Recoome. I've always liked this fight a lot, but never could put my finger on exactly what it was about the fight that really captured my attention. But having rewatched it recently, I think I really started to understand why I always loved it as a kid. There is something to this fight that is special, and even though it's not one of your big bad fights, right? It's not Goku versus Frieza. We know those fights are incredible. Goku versus Cell, Goku versus Vegeta. Okay, Goku versus anyone. But we know it's not one of the big bad fights, right? It's not a boss fight. It's not a fight that drags on for 15, 20 episodes, whatever. This is a simple fight that only takes a couple of episodes, but there's so much in it and so much good, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. The first thing I want to break up is probably the least important thing in this fight, but something that I still really enjoy about it a lot. I'm a sucker for good commentary during a fight. I always loved the World Martial Arts tournaments because I thought the announcer was always pretty funny. It's always great when like Goku and these guys were in the ring and they're fighting and they're tearing the place up and they're blowing the place up and the announcer's just trying to make sense of it all. I always find that really funny. You see a similar thing with Mr. Satan in the Cell games. I think that's hilarious when Hercule's trying to like explain everything that he's seeing in front of him and he has no idea, but he's kind of just making it up as he goes along. I love good commentary during a fight, and in this one you don't really have commentary on the fight. You do a little bit, so much as Jason Birder just having a little back and forth, and I think it's one of the highlights of the fight. I really do. You get some genuine funny moments out of Jason Birder that really just made me laugh on a rewatch. I was like, man, I forgot how funny these two are, just kind of in the background. Jace is worried about his hair. They're worried about getting dirt on him and stuff like that. They're making bets on who's going to win and how fast. The Ginyu Force really brings a lot of comedy, a lot of levity, even down to their silly poses, to what is otherwise a pretty serious and dire moment for our heroes. And I think I like that contrast a lot, that even though they are this force to be reckoned with, they're kind of goofy villains. They're kind of silly, and it's kind of like Vegeta's really losing to these nut jobs. But yeah, that's what's happening. Gohan gets his neck broke, Krillin gets like his back broke, and Vegeta is dead on his feet, you know, by the time that Goku gets there. And so It's really, really good with Jason Birder in the background the whole time, just cracking jokes or being worried about the most nonsensical things. It's one of my favorite parts. But getting more serious and talking about the fight itself, let me just go ahead and say that I guess it's pre-Frieza. You still get quite a bit of it during the Frieza fight, honestly. But certainly after Frieza, you lose a little bit slowly. Again, it's still there a little bit with the androids, but as the power levels increase in the show, you lose a little bit of that every punch matters. And you saw it in Goku and Piccolo versus Raditz, right? You saw it in the Saiyan saga when everyone's trying to beat up Nappa. You saw it Goku versus Vegeta. It was like every serious blow that is landed did serious damage. As the series goes on, the fights get a little bit longer, a little bit more drawn out, a little bit more elaborate, but you lose a little bit of that. You know, somebody can hit another guy 15 times in a row and knock him through a mountain, and the person just gets right back up later in the series. In this fight, every time someone takes a blow, you really feel it. And you feel it on both sides. Even though Vegeta, Krillin, and Gohan are outmatched, all of them have at least one moment. Krillin gets one. Everyone else gets probably at least two moments where they do serious damage to Recoome. Vegeta has several moments where he does legitimate damage to Recoome. Now he gets back up eventually, he shakes it off, and he becomes this unstoppable force against the heroes, if you will. It still feels like it matters. And like I said, you kind of lose that. Like every single blow hits hard. Recoome certainly does a lot of damage when he lands an attack. Every one of his shots on Krillin, Gohan, especially Krillin gets one kick, and the man's out of the fight immediately against Recoome. But every one of those blows feels impactful, and I really enjoy that. There's something simpler about these early DBZ fights. There's something simple about them, something grounded, something real about them. If someone gets knocked through a mountain, they're getting up bloodied, battered, and beaten. I'm kind of moving through the list from least important to most important, and so everyone getting their licks in, I kind of mentioned it a second ago, I think it's a good point to make as well. Even Krillin does get the one good shot where he snaps Recoome's mouth shut on his own blast, knocking all of his teeth out right there. That's a really good shot for Krillin. Also, you see some of Krillin's experience as a fighter over Gohan, being able to direct Gohan on when to strike and to save Vegeta while Krillin delivers the blow. After that, Vegeta will berate Gohan a little bit for not also delivering an attack with Krillin to try to finish Recoome off and just letting Vegeta get blasted. But we'll come to see that ultimately that was the right decision. And ultimately it wasn't Gohan's call anyway, it was Krillin's. So good call by Krillin there to save Vegeta, because they would need Vegeta later on against Ginyu and Frieza and all of the rest of them. And so it was a good call by Krillin there. So you get a little bit of his veteran fighting style. He does get his one good shot in. Gohan also gets to show out a little bit, having a really big moment standing up to Recoome. And I love how it shows the growth of Gohan as a character. Recoome and Nappa are both these humongous, muscular, unstoppable forces. Nothing that anyone does to either one of these two ever really affects them. It seems like no matter what anybody hits Recoome or Nappa with, they cannot be stopped. The contrast there is beautiful, because while the Z fighters were dying at the hands of Nappa, Gohan was too scared to fight. And you can see his growth and his maturity as a character, as a fighter, in the fight against Recoome. Recoome, who is very much like Nappa was at the beginning of the Saiyan saga. Now you have Recoome for the Ginyus doing almost the same thing, just blitzing everyone. And even though they're landing good shots and they're hurting him a little bit, essentially he's unstoppable. And you have that shot of Gohan standing in front of Recoome ready to fight. And it's just like, wow, man, he's really come a long way, and he doesn't stop. He never gives up, no matter how bad the pain is, no matter how beat up he gets by this guy. He just keeps getting back up until Recoome breaks his neck there in the fight. And I think that that's an astounding character arc for Gohan, as Gohan makes that journey, you know, that will eventually come to its climax against Cell, as he continues to climb as a more and more important Z fighter. And then finally you have what I believe is the highlight of the entire fight, and this is what I've really been waiting to talk about a lot. Vegeta in this fight is so good. The writing for Vegeta in this fight is stellar. His strategic mind as a lifelong warrior is put on full display in this fight. And if you watch closely, you'll see every bit of it. From the very beginning, Vegeta charges at Recoome, really takes the fight to him, trying to catch him off guard and do as much initial damage as he possibly can. As the fight starts to turn, you will see that Vegeta is still using his head, trying to outthink and outwork Recoome in this fight. I think it's a brilliant thing. When you see Vegeta on that first volley, he gets this knockdown on Recoome, puts him on the ground, and then drops his knees into him, breaks his armor, does some good damage to him right there, right? And then continues his assault. Just moments later, Recoome would get an elbow on Vegeta, knocking him to the ground, and then Recoome comes down to land the punch, and you see Vegeta push himself out of the way. He's hurt, but he's still conscious enough to dodge in that moment, not allowing himself to be hit by the same technique that he used earlier in the fight. And even though Recoome is the stronger fighter, you can see that Vegeta is the better fighter, the more skilled fighter, able to evade things that Recoome only moments ago could not evade. And you could say that Recoome was arrogant and that he didn't really need to evade those shots because he knew he was tough enough to take them. And that may be true. There may be some truth to that. But you got to admire Vegeta for always being the strategist and always being so tough, taking so many blows and always getting back up. That's what I love about the fight on Earth between him and Goku, is that Vegeta takes a beating in that fight, and in the end, he beats Goku. It's not until Gohan, Krillin, and Yajirobe show up that that fight is won, and it takes everyone to beat Vegeta. And every time he goes down, whether it's the Spirit Bomb or Gohan or whatever it is, every time he goes down, he gets right back up and he's ready to fight again until the very, very end when he's crawling into a spaceship. And you see that on display against Recoome here too. I love Vegeta's strategy when he gets knocked into the water, to know that his opponent can't sense him and to use that lack of visibility to his advantage to get back in the fight. Even after he loses his edge in the fight and he's clearly beaten, when Recoome plucks him up out of the ground and makes the comment of him being like a vegetable, which isn't at all meta, he pulls him up out of the ground, Vegeta plays possum, and then gets him with the blast right in his face. And it's like, man, this guy knows exactly what he's doing. We talked about this moment earlier. When Gohan saved Vegeta, Vegeta was not concerned with his own life, saying, you should have let the blast get me. You should have capitalized on Recoome while he was defenseless, while he was weak. Between the two of you, maybe you could have taken him out. Now, I would argue that later we see Gohan connect with some pretty good shots, and likely him and Krillin combined would not have been able to take Recoome out of the fight there. And I think Krillin's strategy of saving Vegeta ultimately in the long run was the better strategy at that moment. But you got to admire it. You've got to admire Vegeta always thinking about how to get the win. It's not about who dies in the process. It's not about looking good. It's not about fighting fair. It's about trying everything he can to secure the win. And you got to admire that about him. And you just take all these things into consideration, how it really achieves building up each character in this fight. Even Recoome built up to be as strong as he is, to show how strong Recoome is. That way you understand how strong Goku has become when he arrives on Namek. Everyone has a purpose. Vegeta slowly starting to make that turn. Will he be a good guy? Will he not? Showing how strategic, how good of a fighter he is. Showing that Krillin can still strategize. Krillin can still get licks in when he needs to. Showing that Gohan is growing as a fighter, and that he is becoming a force to be reckoned with. Even Vegeta at times shocked by everything that Gohan can do. And then to wrap it all up, every punch that is thrown, every time Recoome is hit hard and he loses a little bit more armor, or his shirt tears a little bit more, he bleeds a little bit more, you think, okay, maybe there's a chance. Maybe they can stop this guy. Because every punch that lands matters. But then he gets back up. And every time he hits one of the heroes, it matters, as they get up slower and slower. I think it's a brilliant fight, and I think it's an excellent showcase of something that is almost lost by the time you get to the end of Dragon Ball Z, which is even the lesser characters who might not be as strong as Goku, they still matter. And every fight that they have still matters. By the time you get to the end of the series, it doesn't matter quite as much for those little guys. But right here in this moment against Recoome, you have one of my absolute favorite fights, and one of the fights that I find to be one of the most underrated fights in all of Dragon Ball Z. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you agree with me? Is the Recoome fight highly, highly underrated? Or am I overhyping it a little bit? Is it really not all that? It is a short fight, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Ultimately, Goku Piccolo versus Raditz was a short fight, and I happen to think it's a pretty good fight as well. But let me know in the comments below what you thought about this fight. Let me know in the comments below what's some other underrated fights in Dragon Ball Z. Some other, not the big fights, not the ones that everyone is always talking about, but what are some of the smaller fights that take place throughout the series that have always held a special place in your heart? Let me hear it down in the comments below. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you disagree with me and you think that the Recoome fight is garbage, don't get mad about it. Remember, this is just one man's opinion. Thanks.